At my chemo appointment, my daughter-in-law leaned close and said it'd be easier once I was gone, so I handed her the power of attorney, right after removing her name. I didn't react immediately. I just sat there, the cold chemo dripping into my veins, while the weight of Claire's words settled deep in my chest. The beeping of machines around me faded into the background as I tried to process what I'd just heard. Once she's gone, we can finally sell that house and use the money for what we actually need, Claire whispered to my son Thomas, clearly thinking I was asleep. The medication often made me drowsy during treatments, and I had my eyes closed, trying to manage the nausea. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. Thomas's response cut even deeper. I know. Mom's been holding on to that place forever. It's way too big for one person anyway. I kept my breathing steady, my eyes closed. They had no idea I was awake, listening to every word. I already talked to a realtor, Claire continued, her voice dropping even lower. He says properties in that neighborhood are going for at least double what your mom paid. We could pay off our debt and still have enough for the lake house we've been looking at. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Thomas cautioned, though I could hear the excitement in his voice. We need to make sure the power of attorney is finalized first. My heart splintered. My own son, the boy I'd raised alone after his father, died when he was just 8 years old. The child I'd worked 2 jobs for, just so he could go to college without debt. Now he was sitting beside me, planning to sell my home while the chemotherapy drugs were still flowing into my body. Claire rustled through something. My purse, I realized with a start. I need to check if she has the documents in here, she muttered. She said she was bringing them today. I had said that. I'd told them I would bring the power of attorney papers to my appointment, already signed, so Claire could help me manage things during treatment. That's what they had suggested, that I needed their help while I was sick, that it would be a burden lifted from my shoulders. What a fool I'd been, or perhaps not such a fool after all, because what Claire didn't know, what Thomas didn't know, was that I had indeed brought signed papers with me. But they weren't the papers they were expecting. 3 days ago, I'd visited my old friend Harold, who had been my husband's lawyer years ago. I'd brought him the power of attorney documents that Claire had given me, documents that gave her and Thomas full control over my finances, my medical decisions, and my property. These are awfully broad, Margaret, Harold had said, frowning as he adjusted his reading glasses. Are you sure you want to give them this much control? I'd hesitated then, not wanting to believe the subtle signs I'd been noticing, the way belongings would mysteriously disappear from my house after their visits, the hushed conversations that stopped when I entered a room, the increasing frequency of comments about how valuable my house had become. Just review them for me, please, I'd asked Harold. Make sure everything is in order. Harold had done more than that. He'd prepared alternative documents, ones that looked similar but limited their power significantly, and included oversight provisions. He'd also recommended something else, something I'd hesitated to do until this very moment. Claire, is this what you're looking for? I said suddenly, opening my eyes and reaching for my purse. Claire jumped, nearly dropping my purse. Her cheeks flushed red. Margaret, I thought you were asleep. I was looking for a tissue. A tissue. Of course. Thomas straightened, in his chair, clearing his throat. How are you feeling, Mom? Do you need anything? Actually, I do, I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm inside me. I need you both to witness me signing these papers. I pulled out an envelope from my purse. Inside were the documents Harold had prepared, power of attorney papers that looked legitimate to the untrained eye. Claire's face lit up immediately. Oh, you brought them. That's great, Margaret. Such a weight off your shoulders. I nodded, forcing a small smile as I uncapped my pen. It certainly will be. What they didn't know was that I had already signed the real papers in Harold's office. Papers that removed Claire completely and limited Thomas's access to my affairs. Papers that protected my home, the home where I'd raised my son, the home that contained every memory of our family. As I signed the decoy documents with a flourish, I felt a strange sense of calm replace the hurt and betrayal. They thought they were winning, thought they were securing their futures at my expense. There, I said, sliding the papers toward them. All done. Claire eagerly took them, barely containing her smile. I'll take good care of these, Margaret. Don't you worry about a thing. I'm sure you will, I replied, leaning back in my treatment chair and closing my eyes again. I may have cancer. I may be 68 years old, but I am far from finished. And I am certainly not the helpless old woman they believe me to be. The nurse came in to check my IV line, and I used the moment to observe my son and his wife. They were already looking at the papers, whispering excitedly, planning their next steps, no doubt. Let them plan. Let them think they've won. Because what they don't realize is that the war has just begun, and I've fired the first shot in silence. As the chemo dripped into my veins, I made another decision. This betrayal would not break me. It would not be the final chapter of my story. In fact, it would be just the beginning. The drive home from the hospital was silent. Thomas had insisted on taking me, claiming Claire couldn't make it because of work commitments. I knew better now. As he pulled into my driveway, I noticed how his eyes lingered on the house, not with nostalgia or affection, but with calculation, like he was already measuring its value. I can come in and make you something to eat, he offered. No need, I said. Eleanor from next door brought over a casserole yesterday. Thomas frowned. You don't need to bother the neighbors, Mom. Claire and I can take care of everything. I just nodded, not trusting myself to speak without revealing what I knew. After he left, I sat on my porch swing, the same one James and I had installed 30 years ago. The memories washed over me as I gently rocked back and forth. James died when Thomas was only 8. Heart attack. No warning. One day my husband was there, coaching Thomas's little league team, and the next day I was a widow with a confused child who kept asking when Daddy was coming home. I'd been a high school English teacher then. The salary was decent, but not enough to maintain our lifestyle and save for Thomas's college. So I took a second job in the evenings, working at the local library. For years, my life was nothing but work, caring for Thomas, and collapsing into bed too exhausted to even grieve properly. I still remember Thomas's high school graduation. I sat there alone among all the two-parent families, clapping until my hands hurt when Thomas accepted his diploma. He'd gotten a partial scholarship to state, but it wasn't enough. That's when I sold my wedding ring and most of the jewelry James had given me over the years. You don't have to do this, Mom, Thomas had protested when I told him. Your education matters more than things, I'd said. And I'd meant it. I sacrificed everything for that boy, postponed my own dreams, worked myself to exhaustion, put every spare penny toward his future. I never regretted it, not once. Even when he moved across the country for grad school, I supported him, sending care packages I could barely afford. When Thomas met Claire during his final year of graduate school, I was thrilled. Finally, my son had found someone to share his life with. I remember flying out for their graduation, spending money I didn't have just to be there. Claire had seemed so perfect, intelligent, ambitious, charming. You raised such a wonderful man, Margaret, she'd told me, giving me a hug. That felt genuine. I hope I can be part of your family. The warning signs were there from the beginning, but I chose to ignore them. Like when they got married and Claire insisted on a lavish wedding. Thomas called me, embarrassed, asking if I could help with the costs. Claire's parents can only contribute so much, he explained, and we found the perfect venue. I dipped into my retirement savings, told myself it was a once-in-a-lifetime event. What I didn't know then was that Claire's parents could have contributed more, much more. They simply chose not to. I learned this years later, when Thomas let it slip during a Thanksgiving dinner. When they couldn't afford the down payment on their first home, I again stepped in, emptying what remained of my retirement account. I told myself it was an investment. In their future, in my future grandchildren. Grandchildren that never came, as Claire decided her career was too important to pause for kids. I never held that against her. It was her choice after all. But it did sting when she started referring to their dogs as my granddogs. The signs continued. Thomas visited less frequently. When they did visit, Claire would comment on how outdated my house was, how I should downsize. There were the hushed arguments I'd overhear, usually about money, the way Claire would roll her eyes when I wasn't looking. The gradual disappearance of family heirlooms after their visits. Mom, have you seen Grandma's silver tea set? I'd asked Thomas during one visit. I wanted to use it today. Oh, that old thing? Claire had interjected. Thomas mentioned it was just collecting dust, so we took it to get professionally cleaned. That tea set never returned. And it wasn't the only thing. My mother's pearl necklace. James's collection of rare coins, antique books that had been in my family for generations, all mysteriously misplaced or taken for cleaning. The worst part? I'd made excuses for them, told myself they were just being helpful, organizing things for me. That Claire's comments about my cluttered house came from a place of concern. What a fool I'd been. Now sitting on my porch swing, I realized how deep the betrayal went. They weren't just waiting for me to die to sell my house. They'd been systematically stripping it of valuables for years. My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. It was Harold. Margaret, did you give them the decoy papers? Yes, I answered, keeping my voice low even though I was alone. They took them without question. Good, Harold said. I've filed the real documents with the county. Claire has been completely removed from having any authority over your affairs, and Thomas's power is limited to medical decisions only, and even those have oversight. Thank you, Harold. There's something else, he continued, his voice serious. I did some digging, as you asked. Thomas and Claire are in significant debt. Credit cards, mostly. They also took out a second mortgage on their house 6 months ago. My heart sank. How bad is it? Bad enough that your house would look like a very attractive solution to their problems. I thanked Harold again and hung up, my hands trembling, slightly. The betrayal was even worse than I'd thought. My own son, my only child, wasn't just planning to sell my house after I died. He needed me to die soon to solve his financial problems. I stood up from the swing, suddenly feeling the weight of my years. But alongside the sadness was something else, determination. Thomas and Claire thought I was just a sick old woman, too trusting and naive to see through their plans. They were wrong. I walked into my house, the home I'd built with James, the home where I'd raised Thomas, and began to make plans of my own. I'd been fighting for survival my entire life, first as a young widow, then as a single mother, and now as a cancer patient. One more battle wouldn't break me. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. The doctor had warned me that chemo brain could make thinking difficult, but my mind felt razor sharp. Perhaps it was the anger, or maybe the determination. Either way, I knew exactly what I needed to do. First, I called Dr. Richards to request copies of all my medical records. May I ask why you need them, Mrs. Wilson? The receptionist asked. I'm getting a second opinion, I lied smoothly. What I really wanted was documentation of my actual condition. Thomas and Claire didn't need to know that my latest scans had shown the tumor shrinking, that Dr. Richards had actually used the word promising during our last visit. Let them think I was getting worse. Their assumptions would be my advantage. My next call was to my bank. I requested an in-person appointment that same afternoon. The manager, Mr. Peterson, had known me for years. His father and James had been fishing buddies. Margaret, good to see you, he said when I arrived, though his smile faltered when he took in my appearance. The chemo had taken my hair and about 20 pounds. I need to make some changes to my accounts, I explained, and I need absolute confidentiality. His eyebrows rose, but he nodded. Of course. I spent the next hour creating a new account at a different bank, one that Thomas and Claire knew nothing about. I transferred a significant portion of my savings into it, leaving just enough in my original account to avoid suspicion. Is everything all right, Margaret? Mr. Peterson asked as he processed the paperwork. Just being cautious, I replied. Cancer has a way of making you realize who really has your best interests at heart. He didn't push further, and I was grateful. On my way home, I stopped at a small electronics store and purchased a nanny cam disguised as a clock radio. The young salesman showed me how to set it up so it would record whenever it detected movement. And sound. Expecting trouble? He asked casually as he rang up my purchase. Just peace of mind, I answered. I placed the camera in my home office, angled to capture my desk where I kept important papers. Thomas had a key to my house. For emergencies, he'd said. I suspected those emergencies involved searching through my belongings when I wasn't home. That evening, Eleanor from next door brought over dinner. Unlike Thomas and Claire, who saw me as a burden or an obstacle, Eleanor had been a genuine source of support since my diagnosis. You look better today, she commented as she set the casserole dish on my kitchen counter. More color in your cheeks. Feel better, I admitted. Stronger. That's wonderful. The treatments must be working. I hesitated, then made a decision. Eleanor was a retired nurse. She was also a widow who had dealt with greedy relatives after her husband's death. If anyone would understand, it would be her. Eleanor, can I tell you something in confidence? She sat down at my kitchen table, her expression serious. Of course, Margaret. Over cups of tea, I told her everything. The conversation I'd overheard, during chemo, the missing heirlooms, the decoy power of attorney, Harold's investigation into Thomas and Claire's finances. Eleanor listened without interrupting, her face growing increasingly concerned. Those ungrateful, she finally said, then took a deep breath. What are you planning to do? I'm not entirely sure yet, I admitted, but I know I need to protect myself and what's mine. Eleanor reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Whatever you need, I'm here. You know that, right? I nodded, fighting back unexpected tears. After feeling so alone, so betrayed, having just one person firmly in my corner meant everything. The next day, Thomas called. Mom, Claire and I were thinking of stopping by this weekend. Maybe do some cleaning for you, help organize things. May now. Grip tightened on the phone. That would be nice, I lied. But actually, I'm feeling much better. Dr. Richards says the treatment is going well. Oh, was that disappointment in his voice? Well, that's good. But we'll still come help. You shouldn't overdo it. If you insist, I said, trying to sound grateful rather than suspicious. After hanging up, I checked the nanny cam footage from the previous day. Sure enough, while I was at the bank, someone had entered my office. Thomas, moving quickly, rifling through the papers on my desk, opening drawers, checking my filing cabinet. He appeared frustrated, not finding whatever he was looking for. Rewatched the footage 3 times, letting the reality sink in. My son, searching through my private papers while I was away. The son I'd sacrificed everything for. That weekend, I prepared for their visit carefully. I left a bank statement visible. On my desk, one that showed only the original account with its diminished balance. I also left a medical bill prominently displayed, with the alarming total highlighted but the insurance coverage pending note conveniently hidden under another paper. Thomas and Claire arrived Saturday morning. Claire brought flowers, cheap ones from the grocery store, and Thomas carried a toolbox. Just thought I'd fix a few things around the house, he explained. That bathroom faucet still leaking? I nodded, playing the role of grateful mother. That's so thoughtful. And Claire, the flowers are lovely. Claire smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. We worry about you, Margaret, all alone in this big house. While Thomas busied himself with the faucet, Claire offered to help organize my paperwork. I'm so good with this stuff, she insisted. It's what I do at work all day. That would be wonderful, I said, leading her to my office. Everything's such a mess since I started treatment. I can barely keep track of anything. I left her there, pretending to go rest, but instead slipped into the guest bedroom next door where I could watch the nanny cam feed on my tablet. Claire immediately began examining every document on my desk, taking photos of some with her phone. When she found the bank statement, she paused, frowning. Thomas, she called out, come look at this. Thomas appeared in the doorway moments later, wiping his hands on a towel. Her account balance is way down, Claire whispered, pointing at the statement. Medical bills, probably, Thomas replied. Speaking of which, he reached for the bill I'd left visible. $60,000? Claire's eyes widened. Is insurance covering any of this? Doesn't look like it, Thomas said, sounding concerned. But not for the reasons a son should be concerned about his mother's medical bills. If this keeps up, there won't be anything left. Claire's face hardened. We need to move faster on getting that power of attorney finalized. And maybe talk to her about selling this place now, while she's still alive. For her own good, of course. Of course, Thomas agreed. I switched off the tablet, having seen enough. My silent plan was working. They had taken the bait, believing exactly what I wanted them to believe. Now I needed to prepare for their next move. 3 days after Thomas and Claire's visit, I had another chemotherapy appointment. This time I went alone. When the nurse asked where my son was, I just smiled and said he had work commitments. That's too bad, she said, checking my vitals. Family support is important during treatment. I have support, I replied, just not from family. The nurse, Diane, had been taking care of me since my first treatment. She paused and looked at me more carefully. Everything okay at home, Margaret? I considered telling her about Thomas and Claire, but decided against it. Instead, I just said, I'm managing. Diane squeezed my hand. Well, I have good news. Dr. Richards reviewed your latest blood work. Your numbers are improving significantly. That is good news, I said, genuinely relieved despite everything else going on. But I'd appreciate if you could keep that between us for now. She gave me a questioning look but nodded. Doctor-patient confidentiality. During treatment, Eleanor texted to check on me. She had also left a casserole in my refrigerator that morning, using the spare key I'd given her years ago, a key I trusted her with far more than I now trusted my son with his. After treatment, I stopped at the community center where I used to volunteer before my diagnosis. The director, Martha, was surprised to see me. "Margaret Wilson! What a wonderful surprise!" She hurried over to hug me. "Should you be out and about?" Thomas mentioned. "Your condition was quite serious." I raised an eyebrow. "Did he? When did you speak to Thomas?" "He called about a month ago," Martha explained. "Said you were very ill and probably wouldn't be able to volunteer again. He even suggested we find a replacement for the reading program." Anger flashed through me. Thomas had no right to make such statements about my condition or my activities. "My condition is improving," I said firmly, "and I'd like to come back, even if just for a few hours a week." Martha beamed. "The children would love that. Emma still asks about you." We arranged for me to come in twice a week. As I was leaving, Martha called after me. "Oh, Margaret, we're having our volunteer appreciation dinner next Saturday." "Nothing fancy, just a potluck. You should come." "I'd love to," I replied, meaning it. On my way home, Thomas called. "Mom, how was treatment? I'm sorry I couldn't make it." "It was fine," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "By the way, Claire and I were thinking, that house is a lot for you to manage. All those stairs, the big yard." "I'm managing just fine," I interrupted. "Still, we were looking at some nice retirement communities. There's one not far from us." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "I'm not interested in moving, Thomas." "Mom, be reasonable. Your condition, my condition is my business," I said firmly. "I'm staying in my home." He sighed dramatically. "We'll talk about this later. Claire and I are coming over for dinner tomorrow. We have some important things to discuss." Before I could object, he hung up. I pulled into my driveway, fuming at his attempt to push me out of my own home while pretending it was for my benefit. Inside, I found a note from Eleanor. "Book club tonight at my place, 7 p.m. New members welcome. E." I hadn't been to a book club in years. Thomas and Claire always seemed to need something when I had plans. Somehow, my activities always got sidelined for their needs. Not tonight. At 7, I knocked on Eleanor's door with a bottle of wine and the novel I'd hastily purchased that afternoon. Eleanor introduced me to 4 other women from the neighborhood. They welcomed me warmly, making space on the couch, pouring me wine, asking thoughtful questions about how I was feeling. Not once did anyone treat me like I was fragile or dying. Patricia, a retired professor, mentioned that her daughter was getting married in the spring. "Small ceremony, just close friends and chosen family," she explained. "You should come, Margaret." I was stunned. "But you barely know me," Patricia shrugged. "I'm a good judge of character. Besides, anyone Eleanor vouches for is welcome in my circle." By the end of the evening, I had invitations to Patricia's daughter's wedding, Ruth's weekly card game, and Marilyn's cooking class. These women, virtual strangers until tonight, had shown me more genuine kindness in 3 hours than my son and daughter-in-law had in years. When I returned home, there were 3 missed calls from Thomas and a text. "Mom, where are you?" Called, "The hospital. They said you weren't admitted. Call back ASAP." I texted back, "I was at a book club. Going to bed now. See you tomorrow for dinner." His response was immediate. "Book club? Mom, you need to rest after treatment. This is exactly why Claire and I worry." I turned off my phone without replying. For the first time in months, I fell asleep with a smile on my face. The next day, Thomas and Claire arrived promptly at 6, bringing takeout food that Claire claimed was heart-healthy. Thomas carried a folder tucked under his arm. "We need to talk about your living situation," he said, barely waiting until we'd sat down. "My living situation is fine," I replied calmly. "Mom, this house is too much for you. What if you fall? Who would help you?" "Eleanor would help me," I said. "Or any of my other neighbors." Claire exchanged a look with Thomas. "Neighbors aren't family, Margaret. You can't rely on them like you can rely on us." I nearly laughed at the irony. Thomas opened the folder. "We found a really nice assisted living facility, just 20 minutes from our house." "No," I said firmly. "Mom, please look at the brochure. It has a dining hall, activities." I said, "No, Thomas, I'm not leaving my home." Claire leaned forward, her voice softening to that condescending tone she used when she thought I was being difficult. "Margaret, we're just thinking about what's best for you. This illness has changed things. You need proper care." And who would buy my house if I moved? I asked innocently. In this market, it must be worth quite a bit. Thomas shifted uncomfortably. That's not the point, Mom. Isn't it? I met his gaze directly. Tell me, what would happen to the proceeds? If I sold this house? Well, you'd use it to pay for the facility, of course, Claire jumped in, and we could manage any leftover funds for you. That's why we need to finalize that power of attorney. There it was. The real reason for this sudden concern about my living situation? I'm not selling my house, I said quietly but firmly. And I'm not signing a power of attorney tonight. Mom, be reasonable. I think you should leave now, I interrupted, standing up. I'm feeling tired. Claire's expression hardened. This is exactly why you need supervision, Margaret. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years, I replied. After they left, I called Eleanor. They tried to get me to move to assisted living, I told her. They already had brochures. Those vultures, Eleanor muttered. What are you going to do? Exactly what I've been doing, I said. Build my case and wait for them to show their true colors. 2 weeks passed. My treatments continued, and to everyone's surprise except mine, I was responding exceptionally well. Dr. Richards used the word remarkable during my last visit. At this rate, we might be able to reduce your treatment frequency, he told me. Your body is fighting back hard, Margaret. I thanked him and asked for a copy of my latest scan results. For my records, I said. He provided them without question. Thomas? And Claire had been quiet since our last dinner, but I knew they were planning their next move. A notice from my bank confirmed it. Someone had tried to access my account information using my social security number, but without the proper authorization. Codes, I called Harold immediately. They're getting desperate, he said after I told him. The good news is they can't do anything without that power of attorney. Which they think they have, I reminded him. The decoy papers? They won't hold up to legal scrutiny. They're just similar enough to fool Thomas and Claire, but they have no actual legal power. Still, I knew I needed to move forward with my plan. I called Thomas that evening. Mom, I was just thinking about you, he answered, his voice warm and concerned, a stark contrast to his behavior at our last meeting. I've been thinking too, I said, trying to sound frail and tired. About what you said, about the house being too much for me. There was a pause, then barely contained excitement. Really? That's great, Mom. I think you're making a wise decision. I'm not saying I'll move, I clarified quickly. But I do think I need help managing my affairs. Things have been slipping through the cracks since I started treatment. Claire and I are here for you, Thomas said. Remember those power of attorney papers we talked about? If you sign those, we can help manage everything. I think I'm ready to do that, I said. But I'd like to discuss a few things first, in person. Can you and Claire come over this Saturday? Absolutely. Should we bring the papers? No need, I said. I have everything we need here. After hanging up, I called Harold and explained my plan. He was silent for a moment after I finished. It's risky, he finally said. Are you sure you want to go this route? We could simply revoke their access to everything and be done with it. I'm sure, I said firmly. I need to see their faces when they realize what's happening. I need them to understand exactly what they tried to do and who they tried to do it to. Harold sighed. It's your call, Margaret. I'll have everything ready by Friday. I spent the next few days preparing. I asked Eleanor to be present at the meeting as a friendly face who could help me understand the legal terms. She readily agreed. I also invited Patricia, who had mentioned during book club that she had been a notary public for years. On Friday, Harold delivered a thick envelope containing the documents I'd requested. Are you absolutely certain about this? He asked one last time. Once it's done, there's no going back. I've never been more certain of anything, I replied. Saturday arrived. I set up the dining room table with coffee and the cookies Thomas had loved as a child. It was a calculated move, a reminder of the mother I had been, the mother who had always put his needs first. Eleanor and Patricia arrived 30 minutes early. I showed them the documents, explaining exactly what each one meant. You're sure this is what you want? Eleanor asked, her expression concerned but supportive. Completely sure, I assured her. The doorbell rang at exactly 2 o'clock. Thomas and Claire stood on my porch, both dressed nicely, both wearing practiced expressions of concern. Mom, you look well, Thomas said, giving me a quick hug. The treatment is helping, I replied, not mentioning just how much it was helping. Claire kissed my cheek. We brought you something. She handed me a small plant. For your windowsill, low maintenance. Like me, the implication seemed to be something that shouldn't take up too much space or require too much care. I thanked her and led them into the dining room where Eleanor and Patricia were waiting. Thomas's smile faltered slightly when he saw them. I didn't realize we'd have company, he said, his tone carefully neutral. Eleanor is helping me understand the paperwork, I explained. And Patricia is a notary. I thought it would be useful to have her here to make everything official. Claire and Thomas exchanged a quick glance. That's very organized of you, Margaret, Claire said, her voice tight. We all sat down at the table. I placed a folder in front of me and took a deep breath. Before we start, I want to thank you both for your concern about my health and my living situation, I began. It's made me think carefully about my future. Thomas nodded encouragingly. That's all we want, Mom, for you to be safe and well cared for. I believe that, I lied smoothly, which is why I've prepared some documents of my own. I opened the folder and pulled out a stack of papers. This first one is a new will, I explained, sliding it across the table. It details exactly how I want my assets distributed after I'm gone. Thomas reached for it eagerly, Claire leaning close to read over his shoulder. Their expression shifted from anticipation to confusion as they scanned the document. Mom, this says your house will be placed in a trust, Thomas said slowly. A trust that benefits the children's reading program at the community center? That's right, I confirmed. And this second document is the trust agreement itself. It's already been filed with the county. Claire's face flushed red. But what? About family? Surely you don't intend to leave your own son without— There's a provision for Thomas, I interrupted calmly. A monthly stipend, provided he completes 40 hours of community service each month at organizations that help cancer patients. Thomas looked up, his expression hardening. Mom, this isn't what we discussed. We thought you were going to sign the power of attorney. I've signed a power of attorney, I said, pulling out another document. Just not the one you provided. This one names Harold Jenkins as my financial power of attorney, with Eleanor as my medical power of attorney should I become incapacitated. Claire stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. Margaret, you're clearly not thinking straight. The chemo has affected your judgment. Actually, I said, pulling out one final document, Dr. Richards disagrees. This is my latest medical report, showing significant improvement. I'm responding exceptionally well to treatment, with an excellent prognosis. Thomas stared at me, realization dawning in his eyes. You knew, all this time, you knew what we were— He stopped himself. Knew what, Thomas? I asked, looking directly into his eyes. That you and Claire have been waiting for me to die so you could sell my house and use the money to pay off your debts? That you've been stealing family heirlooms for years? That you tried to access my bank accounts without my permission? Claire grabbed her purse. We're not staying here to be accused of what, Claire? The truth? I have proof of everything. The missing items, the unauthorized attempts to access my accounts, even recordings of your conversations in this very house when you thought I couldn't hear you. You recorded us? Thomas asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I protected myself, I corrected him, just as I'm doing now. Thomas's face had gone pale. Mom, you don't understand. We're in trouble. We need help. No, Thomas, you don't understand, I said firmly. I would have helped you if you'd asked honestly. I've always helped you. But instead, you chose to steal from me, lie to me, and wait for me to die. I took a deep breath. Now, if you'd like to sign as witnesses to my new will and trust agreement, Patricia is ready with her notary seal. 8 months after that fateful Saturday meeting, I sat in Dr. Richards' office, hardly believing the words I was hearing. Complete remission, he said, smiling broadly as he showed me the latest scan results. The cancer has responded remarkably well to treatment. There are no detectable signs of disease. I stared at the images, at the places where dark masses had once been and now showed nothing but healthy tissue. Tears welled in my eyes. So what happens now? I asked, my voice unsteady. We'll continue monitoring you closely, Dr. Richards explained. Regular checkups, blood tests, scans every few months, but you can return to normal activities. Your body has fought hard, Margaret. You should be proud. I left the hospital feeling lighter than I had in over a year. The warm spring air filled my lungs as I walked to my car, where Eleanor was waiting to drive me home. Well, she asked anxiously as I approached. Complete remission, I told her. Eleanor let out a joyful shout and wrapped me in a tight hug. I knew it. I just knew it. On the drive home, we made plans for a small celebration dinner. Eleanor insisted on cooking, though I protested that I was perfectly capable now. Nonsense, she said firmly. This is a special occasion. You focus on resting and calling everyone with the good news. Everyone. The word made me pause. Thomas and Claire hadn't spoken to me since that Saturday 8 months ago. They'd left my house in stony silence, refusing to sign as witnesses to my new will and trust documents. Patricia had brought in her husband instead, making everything legal and binding. In the following weeks, Thomas had made several attempts to contact me, alternating between angry accusations and tearful pleas for understanding. I'd held firm, explaining that I was willing to have a relationship with him, but only if he acknowledged what he and Claire had done and showed genuine remorse. He never did. The last I'd heard through mutual acquaintances was that Thomas and Claire had sold their house and moved to another state. They were starting fresh, apparently. Part of me hoped that meant they were finally taking responsibility for their actions and their finances. Another part of me doubted it. Are you going to call Thomas? Eleanor asked gently, reading my thoughts, as she often did. I sighed. I don't know. Should I? Only you can answer that, she replied. But remember, family isn't just who you're born to or who you raise. It's who stands by you when you need them most. And I had found that family. In Eleanor, who had been my rock through the toughest days of treatment. In Patricia and the other book club ladies, who never let me miss a meeting, even arranging video calls when I was too tired to attend in person. In Martha from the community center, who had welcomed me back to the reading program with open arms once my strength began to return. Even in Harold, who had become a friend as well as my lawyer, checking in regularly to make sure my financial affairs remained secure. By the time we reached my house, still my house, despite Thomas and Claire's plans, I had made my decision. I would send Thomas a simple text with the news of my remission. Nothing more. The ball would be in his court. As Eleanor and I walked up the porch steps, I noticed a small moving truck parked in front of the house next door. The Sullivan place had been on the market for months. Looks like you're getting new neighbors, Eleanor commented. Sure enough, a middle-aged couple was directing movers who carried furniture into the house. The woman noticed us watching and waved. After giving instructions to a mover, she walked over. Hi there. I'm Deborah Wilson, and that's my husband, Mike. We just bought the place. I introduced myself and Eleanor. Deborah's face lit up with recognition. Margaret Wilson? From the children's reading program at the community center? I nodded, surprised. My niece Emma talks about you all the time. You helped her with reading last year. She's in 2nd grade now and reading above grade level. Emma. The shy little girl who had struggled so much when we first met. Warmth spread through my chest. Emma's your niece? She's a wonderful child. She is, Deborah agreed. Actually, knowing you lived in this neighborhood was one of the reasons we were interested in this house. Emma's parents are being transferred overseas for work, and she'll be staying with us for the school year. She was thrilled when I told her she'd be near Ms. Margaret. After chatting a bit more, we said goodbye to Deborah and continued into my house. Well, that was a lovely coincidence, Eleanor remarked as we entered the kitchen. It was, I agreed, still smiling at the thought of seeing Emma regularly again. That evening, friends gathered at my house to celebrate my good news. Patricia and her husband brought champagne. Ruth from book club made her famous chocolate cake. Marilyn and her wife brought dinner. Martha from the community center came with a handmade card signed by all the children in the reading program. As we sat around my dining room table, laughing and sharing stories, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in years. These people had no obligation to me through blood or history. They had chosen to be in my life, just as I had chosen them. A toast, Harold said, raising his glass. To Margaret, the strongest woman I know. To Margaret, everyone echoed. I raised my own glass. And to all of you, my chosen family. Later that night, after everyone had gone home except Eleanor, who insisted on helping with the dishes, I finally sent the text to Thomas. I received good news today. The cancer is in complete remission. I wanted you to know. I'm white. Didn't expect an immediate response, and I didn't get one. But I had done what felt right to me. Feel better? Eleanor asked as I set my phone down. I do, I replied honestly. What's next for you? She asked. Now that you have a clean bill of health. I looked around my kitchen, the house that had nearly been taken from me, the life I had fought so hard to preserve. I'm going to live, I said simply. Really live. In the following months, that's exactly what I did. I expanded my volunteer hours at the community center, working with Emma and other children who needed help with reading. I joined a senior hiking group that met twice weekly in the nearby state park. I even started taking art classes at the BR community college, something I'd always wanted to do but never found the time for when I was raising Thomas. I also made changes to my home, not selling it, as Thomas and Claire had planned, but transforming it into a place that better reflected who I was now. I converted Thomas's old bedroom into an art studio. I planted a garden in the backyard with Eleanor's help. I hosted book club meetings and dinner parties. On a warm Saturday afternoon in late summer, almost exactly a year after the confrontation with Thomas and Claire, I sat on my porch swing watching Emma ride her bike in my driveway while Deborah and Mike chatted with Eleanor in the yard. My phone buzzed with a text message from Thomas. Mom, I've been thinking a lot about what happened. I was wrong. Claire and I both were. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just a chance to talk sometime. If you're willing. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I looked up at the scene before me, Emma laughing as she rode in wobbly circles, Eleanor and my new neighbors talking animatedly about neighborhood plans. This was my life now. A life I had protected fiercely when it was nearly stolen from me. A life filled with people who valued me for who I was, not what I could give them. I texted back. I'm open to talking. Call me next week and we'll set something up. I didn't know if reconciliation with my son was possible. I didn't know if I could ever fully trust him again. But I did know that I was approaching this from a position of strength now, not vulnerability. The cancer hadn't killed me. The betrayal hadn't broken me. Instead, both had taught me something invaluable, that I was stronger than I knew, that I deserved better than I'd accepted, and that it was never too late to create the life and the family I truly wanted. As I put my phone away and stood to join the others, I felt not just free of cancer, but free of the weight of obligations that had never been fairly balanced. At 68, I had begun again, and this time, I was writing my own story.